Hello there. Welcome to our first video on linear functions, where we will introduce you to the four faces of the function, as well as look at all the connections between those faces. We will start by looking at growth, the four faces of a function in that acronym growth. The G will stand for graph, R will stand for rule or equation, known as both. We will look at the words or the context of a linear function, and we will look at the data of the function in a table. So those are the four faces of a linear function, and all of them are different ways of looking at the exact same thing. So it's not four separate things, but four faces of the same function. Let's take a look at a graph of a linear function. There are four ways a graph could look. There are four examples in green right there. The first example to the left is an example of a linear function, a line that is moving in the positive direction. So we'll say that the slope of that is positive. So as left to right, it is going upwards. Left to right, the second one is going down, so that is negative slope. The third one is flat or horizontal. That is zero slope. So you can think of it as the top part of the Z creates a Z and represents zero slope. The last one going vertically is undefined. So that line kind of like begins the making of a U. That is an undefined slope. The second part, the second face, or the next face, there's not really an order to the faces, is the rule. And the most popular way of looking at that is this equation, y equals mx plus b. Every line follows a certain rule. And we'll talk more about that in the next video. Also, we can also look at it, and we will focus on a little bit here in ax plus by equals c form. So there are two forms, y equals mx plus b and ax plus by equals c. There's a third one called point slope form, but we're not focusing on that at this time. The third face is words. A linear function means nothing unless it follows something in the real world, and an example of that is just a record. Say a record is spun on a record player 200 times already and continues to spin 45 times per minute. That's also known as 45 RPM. That's an actual linear function in words. It has already spun 200 times and it continues to spin at an exact rate of 45 times per minute. That's what specifies this as a linear function, is that the rate of change is constant, and it is the same at any time that you study it. Okay, the fourth face is a table, and you can look at it in two ways, XY table, or in this case, if you follow the words, it's minutes and number of spins. X and Y we use when we're just talking about a generic situation. If we are really looking at a real world situation, then you specify what that X is, in this case minutes, and what the Y is, number of spins. So for our words in the table, it's 0, 200. So when you start looking at the data, no time has passed, it has already spun 200 times. Then each minute from there, it grows 45. After 1 minute, 245, 2, 290, 3, 335. And all that data can also be written in the right table. The table on the right, that is. So that is actually even more specific when you say minutes and spins. So that's how we would like to look at every situation. If we're just studying it, then we'll look at X and Y. But when we're really working on a situation, we should label the X and Y what they are in the real world. Okay, let's take a look back at the graph. If we graph this, it's going to look something like that. Beginning at 200 when x is 0. So that is how the linear function of if we stick to it, our words, that's the linear function graph of the words. So we'll talk about those connections in a second. The equation, if you go to R, rule equation, is right there. Y equals 40x plus 200. So now I'm giving you concrete examples of each of the faces. And to the table, because the words that's just the only way you can look at the words. If you look at the table, the left-hand side you could put x, and then the right-hand side you put 40x plus 200, which is how each number grows. Whatever you input in the x, that's what you do on the right to get the output. Now what I've circled in yellow is the 200 under the words. I've circled the 200, and what I want to do now is look at the connection between all the faces. The 200 shows up in words, and it shows up in the Y column in our table, and spins column in our table. in the y side of the graph, y side of the table in its equation. In the graph, the 200 is circled there in yellow. That shows up there. That's where it crosses the y-axis. And in the rule equation, there's the 200 again. So what we want to do is take a step back and look at how all of these faces are connected. In a sense, beginning with the words and then following through in the three other faces. So all of the four faces should always connect. If they don't, then maybe then something is incorrect in the way that you've translated them. Now I want to circle and focus on the 45 times per minute. So that 45 times per minute is how much it grows. So look at the words and the 45 in words, and then look at the 45 that shows up in the table. The growth is 45 per number, and then what happens is you multiply the 45 to the x in every situation. The 45 and the graph, what I circled there is how from left to right it will grow. That is your rise over run. That's really 45 over 1, so it'll go up 45 and over 1. And in the rule equation, that's your m, or your number that is multiplying to the x. So that 45 shows up in all the four faces as well. And that is the intro for linear functions and how we need to look at it, or all the faces we need to look at. It's knowing just the equation is not enough. There are all four faces, which if you take a step back again, you should see how they all connect. They're not four separate things, but four of the same. Okay, thank you very much.